We will start by looking at the dimension of size. We have already seen that by size we mean the total number of people living in a given place at a given time. The size of a population is affected by incidents of births, deaths, and migration. The magnitude of births, deaths, and migration differs in space and time, thus affecting the total number of populations in different areas or in the same area at different times. Births, deaths, and migrations are events that are continuously taking place, resulting in continuous changes in populations. We therefore describe populations as being dynamic because they are continuously changing. The course will now focus on measuring these population dynamics. But before we go into detail, it is important to understand the difference between a rate and a ratio. A ratio compares the size or the number or the degree of two or more similar things. On the other hand, a rate compares two different things and usually denotes the frequency or the change by which a certain event occurs. We will begin with the measurement of fertility or the measurement of births, also referred to as natality. We either have crude rates if the measure is for the entire populations, or specific rates if the measure is for subpopulations. And the simplest measure of natality is the crude birth rate. Crude birth rate gives the number of live births per 100 population in a given year. As a formula, we can write crude birth rate equals births during the year divided by total population times 1000. However, the crude birth rate is not a good measure of natality because it includes men and children who are not affected by the process of childbearing. However, the crude birth rate is very useful where age-specific data is not available. And to overcome the weakness of the crude birth rate, we have the fertility rates. By fertility, we refer to the number of live births a woman has had in her childbearing period. The conventional childbearing age is between 15 and 49 years old. Fertility should not be confused with fecundity. Fecundity is the physiological capability of a woman to conceive and give birth, whilst on the other hand, fertility is a voluntary action. And the first measure of fertility is the general fertility rate. The general fertility rate measures the number of live births per 1000 women in conventional childbearing age. And remember the childbearing age is from 15 to 49 years. This measure is calculated per year. And as a formula, we can have general fertility rate as births during the year divided by population of women aged 15 to 49 times 1,000. General fertility rate is a more polished measure than the crude birth rate to compare fertility across populations, because the general fertility rate relates births only to women who are in the childbearing age. However, the general fertility rate fails to highlight variations among women in childbearing age. Typically, very young and very old women in reproductive ages have lower fertility levels. The general fertility rate fails to highlight this variation. We therefore have another measure known as the age-specific fertility rate. This measure overcomes the weakness of the general fertility rate. The age-specific fertility rate gives the number of births per year per 1,000 women of a specific age group. Traditionally, women in childbearing ages are divided into 7 age groups of 5 years each, namely 15 to 19, 20 to 24, 25 to 29, 30 to 34, 35 to 39, 40 to 44, and 45 to 49. As a formula, age-specific fertility rate equals births to women in an age group A divided by the total number of women in an age group A times 1,000. Assuming our age group A in the formula is the age group of women aged 30 to 34 years. This formula tells us that the age-specific fertility rate will be found by dividing births to these women aged 30 to 34 by the total number of women in that age group. Age-specific fertility rate is the most refined measure of fertility. However, the measure is cumbersome when you want to compare fertility for different populations. Therefore, we have another measure known as the total fertility rate, which overcomes this weakness of being cumbersome. Total fertility rate gives the average number of children a woman will have during her childbearing years if she were to pass through all her childbearing years conforming to the age-specific fertility rates of a given period. The total fertility rate is given by this formula. This formula simply states that you will add all the age-specific fertility rates starting from the age 15 to the age 49. The sum of these age fertility rates will be multiplied by 5. And then you divide the result by 1000. That's what this formula in a nutshell says. You add all the age-specific fertility rates for the 7 groups and then multiply the result by 5 and then divide the answer by 1000. We also have another measure which is known as the gross reproduction rate.